Alright guys, welcome to another video from XF Motorsports. Today we have a C63 AMG in the shop, and yeah, if you've already guessed it, this one is broken too. We came over here on a tow truck a few days ago and it wasn't running. Someone had done a repair on it, changing some of the things on the cams, and they made one small mistake on it while putting this engine back together, because of which one bolt came loose and it could have led to really catastrophic damage inside the engine, which I really hope has not happened in this case, but I wouldn't really get to find out until I take a bit more of this engine apart. I have started taking a bit of this engine apart already because I wasn't planning to do a video on it originally, but then I thought that I haven't made a video on these M156 engines before, so this is a good opportunity to go over some of the common issues on these engines, the cams, headbolts, and yeah, just talking about some of the things to look out for on this engine. And while also talking about this specific mistake, and definitely not to make this mistake for other people watching the video. And yeah, let's go from there. Let's start by taking some more of this engine apart, looking to see what the damage is, and then going from there and see what it takes to actually fix it. So starting off by showing you guys everything that I have done on the engine so far, and also what I've found out inside it. So I've taken off the valve covers. Taking off the valve covers on this engine is not too difficult. There's just a few bolts around the valve covers that you need to remove, and some things that you have to unplug, and the ignition coils that you have to remove. And then the whole valve covers come off, and looking inside it, then you get to see the cams. The cams on this engine are one of the problematic things that you need to look out for, because after a certain mileage or after a certain bit of use, they do start to wear out, like the tip of the cam lobes start to wear out, and then eventually they keep wearing out until a really low point. And then you start hearing noises from the engine, and also it doesn't make its proper power because then the valves aren't opening properly. But for this specific one, they're not too bad. You can just see a bit of discoloration on the tip, so you can see that the issue is starting to happen, but it's not that bad at this point that it would be noticeable or anything. Same on the other side. You can also see the marks on the cams right at the tip. So yeah, that's something in this engine, and it's a bit of an expensive issue to repair because the cams themselves are really expensive. They're like $700 each, I believe, and there's 4 of them, so that doesn't make the whole thing easy. The other issue on this engine was the head bolts, which there was also a recall for. So the head bolts are right there. This is the newer style of head bolts. The older style was a Torx bolt, and it's a bit of a I guess a matter of luck if it breaks or not, but sometimes those older style head bolts do break, and then the head of the bolts just breaks off. This newer style has a completely different head on it, that's why it doesn't break. So that's one of the things to look out for. This car, on this specific engine, the person was actually replacing the head bolts, because of which he had to remove the cams, and after putting the new style of head bolts in, that's when he made a bit of a mistake and this whole issue happened. And while starting off by showing you guys the issue on this engine, you might notice that the engine is at 40 degrees right now. That's the position where the timing should be set so that it's everything is in its proper place. So you can put this timing tool on. So this timing tool basically goes on when both these bolt things on the cam line up, so that you can go in, and there's these 2 holes at the back of these sprockets that you'll see that are facing upwards. But on this one, if you see how everything is sitting, you can see that this cam is not on timing. It has actually moved. So it's completely different from this one. And the other thing you'll notice is that this whole thing is loose on it. So this is a variable valve timing oil thing that actually, like, oil pressure actually goes inside this, and it turns it one way or the other way. I'll show you this thing better once everything is apart, but basically all the screws on it have come loose. And even the main cam bolt, there's a bolt that goes in from here that is supposed to secure the cam to the sprocket and everything, so they all move together and they don't slip on each other. That bolt has come completely loose, and of course that means that the cam is spinning free. It's not spinning together with the rest of the engine anymore. So this could be an extremely big issue because of course this is an interference engine. That means that the valves share the same space in the engine that the pistons share, but at a different time. So if the timing is off on this engine, the valves could run into the piston and cause a lot of damage inside it. So what I've done so far on this engine is that I have taken all the spark plugs out on one side. I've looked inside it, and I've just made sure that there is no catastrophic damage inside it. And so far, believe it or not, it's looking pretty good. There's no marks on the pistons. There's no missing pistons inside it, first of all, which is a good sign. There's no marks on the pistons like the valve have hit them. So that's, again, a good sign. And also the place where the cams are stopped right now, this was the place where I found the engine, actually. You can see that none of the valves are actually open. So all the valves are closed. So all that, yeah, it gives me a little bit of confidence that this engine might have gotten away from catastrophic damage and everything might be fine inside it. But of course, that's not something that I'm 100% sure of right now. And to be 100% sure of that, what I'll do is that, first of all, I'm going to be taking this whole thing apart, fixing this issue, tightening all the bolts, putting everything back on properly. For removing the cam adjusters and cam sprockets, first you need to remove these cam solenoids that sit in front of the camshafts. For removing this, there's 5 Torx bolts that are holding it in place, and yeah, once they're taken off, the whole plate basically comes off. I only removed the cam position sensor wires. All the other wires, I just left them in place because you don't really need to remove them. You can just leave this thing aside. Okay, here's a look at the engine after taking a bit of it apart, and this is the plate that goes over there. It's the solenoids for controlling the variable valve timing, and I'll explain in a little bit how this works. And but right now, showing you guys the issue. Right now you can see that the phase of this one is completely off. So yeah, first what I'll do is I'll bring the cam to that proper timing. Then I'm going to put the timing tool in place, and then I'll remove this whole sprocket thing from the front, and yeah, basically put it back together properly, and yeah, then do a compression test on it. That will make sure that if the compression turns out normal, it will tell me that everything else is fine. If it doesn't turn out normal, then that means that I have more trouble to look out for in this engine. So yeah, anyways, we're turning this cam. Well, the first thing is that the engine needs to be at 40 degrees. What the 40-degree mark does is that it makes sure that none of the pistons are at top dead center. You can also put a scope in there and make sure that none of them are at top dead center. That will make sure that you do have the timing right. After that, there's a socket over here, spanner that you can put on over here on the cam, using which you can turn it. And yeah, while turning the cam, just be extra careful that if you feel anything touching, don't force it. It usually should spin pretty easily. Other than the spring pressure, there shouldn't be any other pressure on it. And yeah, once it's brought to its proper position, I'm just going to be putting the timing tool on and then removing the sprockets, and then going from there. So after that, I had to turn the intake cam to bring it to its proper position so I could put the timing tool in place. But I have to say that don't do this job if you are not sure of what you're doing. You have to be really careful whenever you're turning the cam in an interference engine. You have to be extremely sure that it's not going to hit any of the pistons. Scope the engine multiple times, make sure that none of the pistons are in a place where the valves would hit them, and then only turn the cam, and still be extremely careful turning the cam. But once the cam was brought to its proper place, I could finally put the timing tool in place and remove the cam bolt that was holding the sprocket and everything in place. Okay, after taking the main cam bolt and this thing off, the cam position sensor, the thing that the cam position sensor reads off, I think my suspicion of this bolt being loose was wrong, because this bolt was tight, and even when it came off it was tight. But the weird thing is that these bolts are like completely loose, and I don't feel like, at least some of them, I don't feel like they like can be threaded in properly. So it seems like either they're like half broken or there's something wrong with them, because I can just push them in by hand and pull them out by hand. So either the threads are gone or the bolts themselves have broken. But let me pull one of these out, and yeah, well, holy shit, it is, the tip is actually broken on it. So these bolts actually, they are supposed to go through this whole plate, and they're supposed to bolt to the sprocket. But by the looks of it, it seems like it is long enough that it should be going into the sprocket and holding on to the sprocket. But basically, yeah, what has happened is that these bolts for some reason have come loose, and they weren't holding the sprocket in place. That's why the sprocket was free from the rest of the cam, and that's why the cam was not turning with the rest of the engine, and it was just stuck in one place. So yeah, next I need to take off all these 5 bolts. Actually, I can probably do that right now, since the engine has done the work of removing these bolts for me. So let me take out all these bolts and see what I find out behind this thing, because I'm pretty curious to find out what happened here. But it, by the looks of it, it definitely seems like either these bolts were not put in properly, or I don't know, something definitely happened. So yeah, all three of these are off. Let me use two hands over here to grab that spring, so I'll need to put the camera away for now. So after taking the sprocket and everything off, here's a look at everything, and this seems like a really weird issue because these bolts, like half the bolts are actually left in there and then half of them are broken off and they came off. So I'm not sure why these bolts broke off, whether they were left loose and the whole thing just rattled and these broke off, or whether it was some other reason. But yeah, that's pretty weird to see happen. But this plate at the back is also damaged a little because of course the bolts hitting it either way, they have damaged it a bit, but that's fine because the owner of this car actually did leave a spare cam and this whole thing an extra one along, so I do have spare parts to make the whole thing work. But yeah, basically to explain this whole mechanism and why it's like this and how the whole thing works. So basically, yeah, the solenoid, this is the cam position sensor, the thing the cam position sensor reads off, and this thing is where the solenoid sits, and the solenoid basically diverts oil pressure to either these holes or these holes. And where these holes lead to is that I believe these holes are leading to these 5 holes over here, and then these holes are leading to a passage inside that basically oil flows between the bolt and that gap over there. And these actually line up with so these 5 holes actually feed oil pressure to these 5 holes over here, and then the inside passage goes to these tiny holes that are drilled on the side. These outer 5 holes actually lead oil to that opening over there, and the inside ones lead like push oil to this part over here. So basically what happens is if the solenoid feeds all the oil to these outer holes, it will push this whole thing that way, which will change the phase of the cam, and if it feeds oil that way, we'll push it the other way. So that's how basically the engine changes valve timing depending on where it needs to change the valve timing to. This spring and this little thing that sits over here, it's like a lock, so like it can actually lock timing at that place. So now you can see that it's locked and I can't move it by hand anymore. And yeah, the other weird thing about these engines is that also there's 2 gears on this rather than 1. That's just for backlash because of course whenever there's gears in an engine, there's going to be backlash, so like they have to leave a bit of gap so that gears have a bit of free play in them. But of course when you're using gears on a camshaft, then any play in the gears would make an awful lot of rattling noise because camshafts, they have spring tension, so of course when you're compressing the spring is forcing the sprocket back, but when the spring is being uncompressed, it's pushing the sprocket forwards. So if there's no spring thing in the gears, it's basically going to be rattling around because of the backlash and making an awful lot of noise. So yeah, that's basically why this is there. But yeah, talking about what I have to do to fix it, I need to remove all these broken bolts from the sprocket. Then I need to put new ones in there, put tighten them properly. I have new cam bolts already, so I'm going to be replacing that too, putting everything back together, and then really hoping that the compression is normal and nothing has bent or broken inside the engine. Now, just to tell you guys a bit more about this issue, the cam adjuster never really needs to come apart for doing any work on the cams. The person that was fixing this engine, he just took this cam adjuster off to clean it and stuff, and because it doesn't really need to come off, the workshop manual doesn't really have any torque specifications or any methods for actually taking it apart. And because it doesn't have any torque specifications, the person that did this just hand tightened these bolts. And after discussing the whole issue with him, that's the conclusion that we basically reached, that these bolts were not torqued properly. That's why they broke and all this happened. Okay, after looking a little bit more into this issue, I think I get why these bolts broke, because I was torquing all these bolts that go on this sprocket, and I just decided to check the torque of this one that was also exposed over here, and sure enough, it turns out it was really loose, extremely loose, and I was able to torque this one. But now I'm thinking that if both the only 2 bolts that I could reach on this one were loose, that means all the others might be loose as well, and that means that these 2 sprockets might also be loose because the person replaced the head bolts on both heads and he had to take off all cams, and I believe he would have taken these ones off too if these 2 were loose. So yeah, that makes my job a little bit longer. But what I'll do is that I'll do everything for this side, and first I'll do the compression test, like actually turn the engine over and see if it's making compression, because if it's not even making compression, it might be a longer job. I don't want to put more effort into something that might not be good at the end. So for the other cam adjuster, I just took one bolt off at a time, just put some Loctite on it and put it back in. I didn't take the whole thing off because I didn't want to do too much work on it, because I knew at this point that I wasn't sure if the head was fine, and if the head wasn't fine, then I would be taking these cams off and doing a lot more work on this head anyways. So yeah, that's why I just put everything back together really quickly, got everything back to timing, and yeah, just torqued the cam bolts down. Okay, so now I've put the valves and everything back together, and I turned the engine one rotation just to make sure that everything still lines up back on the timing marks, and everything is lining up pretty well, and there's no interference, nothing is touching each other. The engine is spinning pretty smooth. So next what I have to do is I have to do a compression test on this engine. So I'm going to be using one of these compression test gauges, just putting it in the spark plug holes and then cranking the engine a few times. I'm still going to leave the valve covers open because I'm not bothered to put the engine back together properly until I find out that the compression and everything is normal, which it's still a bit of a nervous moment saying that it would be normal, because of course this issue happened on a running engine, so it's highly likely that something might have touched it, like a valve might have touched the piston. That's why I really want to do the compression test first before I start putting any of this back together. Now there's two ways of doing a compression test on this car. One is the way that I'm going to be using this gauge. The other way is using the Benz computer, and there's actually a way that the car calculates compression itself using the MAF sensors by sensing how much air is being sucked in on every stroke of the engine, but that way is not the most accurate, and the other problem is you'll have to put the engine back together entirely just to test it that way. But for this one I'm just going to be using my regular compression tester. Let's do a quick compression test and hope that we get good results, which is extremely optimistic, but let's see what happens. Okay, so after doing the compression test, the values on 2, 3, and 4 were looking really good, but that still doesn't make me too happy because the value on number 1 was 0. There was no compression at all. That, of course, means that there's a bent intake valve on it, like I was suspecting. Of course, it would have been a really lucky coincidence if all the cylinders got away with not like any interference. So because on a running engine, if something like this happens, it's highly likely that a piston will run into a valve and something's going to happen, and of course it did happen in this case. So I put a scope back in number 1 just to have a better look at it, because I did scope this engine before too, but it's hard to tell. Like even right now you can see number 1 looks perfectly intact, barely any marks, but if you just really carefully look at it, you can see this little bit of mark over here, and I believe that's where the intake valve, or probably both the valves, hit the piston over there. This mark over here is normal, by the way. That's the indent they leave in the piston when they make the piston, just so that the intake valve has more space to go over here. But yeah, in this case the intake valves definitely did hit the piston, and they are bent. That's why it's not making compression, so that obviously means that the repair is not over here. Quite a bit more of this engine will have to come apart. The whole head will have to come off, but I think this engine is still much luckier than the case of the CLS 55, because if you remember from that video, that engine completely broke a piston and broke the block too, just because of the timing being wrong and a valve hitting a piston. So this, in that aspect, is pretty lucky that it's not that damaged inside. But still, I guess I will only find the full story when I take the head off, because the problem with these scopes is that you can only look down and onto the piston. You can't look up and see what's going on the intake valves and stuff. So that will still have to wait for later, when I pull more of this engine apart and take out the head entirely and then see what the damage is inside it. But of course I'm not going to be doing that anytime soon, because I was working out of sequence on this car on a Sunday, because there was quite a lot of cars piled up over here that I needed to work on and finish. So this guy was in a bit of a rush. He wanted me to at least inspect the engine before fixing it properly. That's why, yeah, Sunday was supposed to be my free day, but I was here trying to get like everything figured on this car. But of course now it's not going to be that easy to fix. I know the head is going to come off, so yeah, it's going to be another video coming on this car where I'm going to fix all that. One quick shout out for this video. This company Oxbeam, they sent me these LED lights a long time ago that they wanted me to install on this car, the E55 ASL, but I still haven't even put the fenders and made the headlights for that car yet, and it's probably not going to happen soon judging by how much work has come into the shop. So I'm just going to be installing it on my friend's Honda Civic today. This is Ibrahim's Honda Civic, and it's a turbo Honda Civic. He specifically told me to mention in the video. So yeah, I'm quickly going to be installing these LED lights and showing you guys how these LED lights work. So for installing these LED lights, it's quite a lot easier than replacing the cams on your C63, fortunately. So all you have to do is you have to remove the bulbs, original bulbs from your car. You just have to twist them and they come out. These new aux beam bulbs do come with a ballast and everything that you will need with them, so you just plug the ballast into the bulb. Then you connect the ballast to the plug that was before going into your bulb. And then basically, yeah, you just put the bulb back in and you find a place to actually mount this ballast for the headlight. And that is literally it. After that, your LED lights are already installed. So here's what the aux beam LED light looks like when it's installed on the car. It's actually the first difference you notice is that the stock light was this orangish color and this one is like the LED color, so it actually matches the color on the LED daytime running lights of the car. So this is the OEM one, it's that ugly orange color. And also in terms of strength, you can tell that it's quite a bit brighter than the OEM one. So this is the OEM one, and that's the LED one, so it's quite a big difference actually. Let me just take the car out and show you guys the light against a wall or something so you can have a better idea. So that is the difference between the aux beam headlight and the OEM headlight. You can tell that the LED one is quite a lot brighter than the other one, and it's also, the color is the other difference you see. So yeah, I'll link this headlight in the description below. I just gotta quickly change the other one as well so he's not driving around like a clown with two different colored headlights. And yeah, if you guys like it, I'll leave the link in the description below. You can go ahead and buy it. Another quick shout out, my friend Karen made this super amazing painting of the E55 ASL that I have in my office over here. So this is a super cool painting. She has an Instagram channel where she posts all her paintings, and also she sells her artwork. So if you guys are interested in something like this, getting custom paintings made of your car or anything else that you want, definitely yeah, go check out her page and leave an order or two for her, because she has been helping me out a lot. She's actually the person that does all the office work over here, like invoicing, all the finances, paying all the bills and everything, because I'm too bad at that stuff. So this is a front desk. I don't think I've shown you guys this before either in any of the videos. It's not complete right now. I still need to paint it and stuff, and still need to add a big XF Motorsports logo over there that I will get to making. I have made another E55 AMG seat over there. That's the office chair. That's the office computer that Karen works on and does all her stuff. And for this one, this is going to be a couch later on. This is an E55 backseat that I'm going to be turned into a couch. On the front, like right over here, I'm going to make an engine block table, which I'm going to make from that engine block. That's the engine block from the CLS 55. I still held on to this one because well, I need to take some measurements from it so I can make the manual swap adapter with the 350Z transmission. So I'm pretty sure, I think I might have shown you guys this transmission in previous videos before, but yeah, I was taking some measurements from this engine, this transmission and that engine to make an adapter to make these two work together. But the only piece of the puzzle I'm missing right now is the flywheel and the clutch and everything, and of course that is coming together with the E55 that this transmission is for. That car is going to be here in hopefully a week or two from now, so that's another really big project that I'm going to be working on soon. Other than that, there's also the Skyline, that the parts for this car are almost here now, so tomorrow we're going to be starting work on this car, rebuilding the engine. And well, the good news for this car is that the person that rebuilt this engine previously, that well, did screw up and caused the engine to blow, he decided to provide all the new parts for this engine. So he is providing a new crank, some seals, and a few other things for the new builds. So that's pretty good. That covers quite a lot of the cost for the new rebuild now. And yeah, of course, that video is also going to be coming up really soon. This Thunderbird is also over here for an engine rebuild, but I'm not going to be starting on this one anytime soon. Well, not anytime soon, sorry. In a few weeks I'm going to be starting on it, but before I get started on this, I need to fix the Skyline. Then there's another 300ZX coming in that needs quite a bit of work, new turbos and a few mods, so that's going to be next. And then after that, well, no, after that there's another car that's coming in, and after that is the Thunderbird. So there's, yeah, I really need to pick up the pace over here. There's quite a lot of cars stacked up, quite a lot of parts that I still need to make on the CNC machine, and well, yeah, the work just never ends over here. So yeah, that's going to be everything for now. Thanks for watching. I will see you guys in the next one.